You might think you know what student voice really means in education. Maybe you picture suggestion boxes or student councils.
Hmm.
But what if the very systems, the debates we have, even the well-intentioned ones designed to hear students, are actually somehow silencing them?
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah, what if the struggles we see in classrooms today aren't new? What if they're just echoes of old wars, old arguments, and the most important voices, the students are getting lost in all that noise?
Lost in the crossfire, you could say.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into a really vital essay. It's called Not Another Forgotten Echo: Student Voice, Fidelity Culture, and the Fight for Access by Jaime Hoerricks.
A fantastic piece.
It really is. And it's not just a critique. It really unpacks how policies and discussions, things meant to improve education, can unintentionally end up erasing the experiences of students, especially, those who are often marginalized anyway.
Right, without any malice intended even.
Precisely. So our mission today is to unpack Hoerricks' critique of how these debates often miss the real middle, the students.
Okay.
We'll dig into this idea she calls fidelity culture, take a hard look at student surveys, and talk about this crucial fight for what she terms narrative sovereignty.
Really important concepts.
Definitely. Get ready to maybe challenge some assumptions about what it means to truly listen in education.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What sparked this whole reflection for the author was a press release. It was from AERA Open, titled The Missing Middle: General and Special Educators' Views of Effective Mathematics Instruction. And for Hoerricks reading this, it wasn't just research. She called it an echo chamber, a return of an old war. What was it about that report, do you think, that triggered such a strong reaction?
Well, I think it goes right to the core of her essay. She describes this feeling almost immediately of walking into an imagined forest like the Ardennes, a place known for forgotten battles.
Wow.
Even before finishing the abstract, she said she heard the clatter of arguments passed. It wasn't just the findings, it was the language. Terms like procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, explicit instruction, productive struggle.
Familiar terms in education, definitely.
Right, but for her, they weren't neutral. They were like old weapons, pulled out again for these debates that seemed to never end.
Okay.
And the IRA paper itself, it highlighted what she calls these epistemic bunkers, sort of like fortresses of thought,
Right.
where special educators and general educators are kind of huddled down, each group absolutely convinced by their evidence and really suspicious of the other side's.
And that creates these huge divides.
Huge divides over really basic questions like what counts as teaching, what counts as learning, what counts as enough. It becomes this professional standoff where both sides feel they're standing on solid, evidence-based ground.
It's easy to see how that kind of academic standoff, those philosophical battles, could filter down and create real confusion, maybe even tension, right in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Because, as she points out, when educators are stuck in those epistemic bunkers, fighting these old pedagogical wars, the real missing middle isn't some abstract concept, it's the actual student.
The child.
Yeah, their learning experience gets quietly fractured by these bigger battles happening way above their heads, and maybe no one even realizes the systemic impact.
Right. Powerful framing.
So after highlighting these, old wars still being fought in education circles, the author points to something even more profound, something missing from the picture.
Right.
As she looks at these debates, the research syntheses, the big position statements from groups like NCTM or CEC, she asks, where are the children themselves?
Yeah.
She says the children themselves were missing. It's such a stark, simple observation, but it hits hard.
It really does. And this is where Hoerricks' own experience as an educator comes through so strongly, that sense of urgency. She says, look, my students with IEPs, individualized education programs, my autistic Gestalt processors, those are students who tend to process information more holistically in patterns, not step by step.
Okay.
The ones who sit in my room trying to puzzle through language not made for them, they had no seat at this table.
Just completely absent from the conversation about them.
Exactly. They're spoken about, spoken over, but never speaking. And she argues very powerfully, this isn't just an oversight, it's a structural omission. It's baked into the system.
Wow. Structural.
Yeah, it's like their experiences are just too messy, too complicated to fit neatly into these academic debates or policy frameworks.
Or just inconvenient, maybe.
Could be. And she voices this fear that her students will just become echoes. Their silence gets misread as incapacity. Maybe their frustration gets reframed as a behavior problem or something else it's not.
It's a disturbing image, isn't it? Kids just sort of vanishing beneath the surface of all these arguments between adults.
It really is. Unseen, unheard.
So this brings us to, I think, a really crucial takeaway for anyone listening, especially educators or policymakers. When the experts are debating methods and strategies, how often do we genuinely ensure that the voices, the lived experiences of the learners themselves are truly at the center?
Not just the subject of the debate.
Exactly, not just data points, but active participants. We need to shift them from being the topic of the conversation to being central to it.
A fundamental shift.
Okay, so moving from those big debates, the essay then zooms in on a specific term, a concept Hoerricks finds really problematic: fidelity culture.
Ah, yes, fidelity.
She writes, fidelity, how that word stings. Now, fidelity often sounds like a good thing, right? Like being faithful to a proven teaching method.
Sure, it implies commitment, effectiveness.
But she argues that in practice, this fidelity culture often leads to a kind of erasure. So how does she draw the line? I mean, surely some consistency in teaching is good.
That's a really important point, and her critique is quite nuanced here. She isn't arguing against all structure or effective practices.
What she's challenging is the specific culture of fidelity that often translates into these very rigid instructions for teachers. Things like, do not model, do not intervene, do not scaffold until the struggle has run its course.
Right, the productive struggle idea taken to an extreme.
Exactly. And that can directly clash with the legal and, frankly, ethical requirement to support students, especially those with documented needs, like IEPs. She asks this really pointed, almost chilling question. What if the struggle is not fertile ground? What if it is quicksand?
That's powerful, quicksand.
Yeah. The worry is that productive struggle, which can be a valuable idea, slides very easily into what she calls institutional neglect if it's applied rigidly, without truly understanding the individual student.
Without nuance.
Without nuance. And she connects this to a bigger picture, too. She suggests that curriculum publishers entrench inequity not by accident but by design, essentially outsourcing differentiation to already overburdened teachers.
So the system itself promotes inflexibility. That's the argument. The curriculum is rigid, the expectation is fidelity, and the teacher is left trying to bridge the gap, often without enough support, which inevitably impacts the students who need flexibility the most.
This really makes you pause and reconsider that whole concept of productive struggle. Is all struggle good struggle?
Right.
Or can pushing for fidelity above all else sometimes become a barrier? Are we, focusing so much on the how of teaching that we lose sight of the who?
It definitely prompts that reflection. Are we serving the process or the person?
Yeah. Okay, but the essay doesn't just stop at academic debates or teaching methods. It also turns its attention to another tool we often use to capture student voice, the good old student experience survey.
Ah, the surveys, yes.
We've all seen them. And the author describes her district's version as an hour of dense questions, Likert scales layered like bricks.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
All designed, she says, to flatten messy human feeling into something legible to administrators. It's about making feelings quantifiable.
That description is spot on. And she calls the whole process ventriloquism.
Ventriloquism. How so?
She means the students are being spoken through, not spoken with.
Right.
Their complex, messy, individual experiences get filtered through categories predetermined by adults.
Right, the boxes they have to check.
Exactly. And then the answers get cross-tabulated against state priorities. So the data might show, say, a rebound in student engagement. But her gut feeling, as a teacher seeing those kids every day, her gut says exhaustion.
So the numbers tell one story, but the reality might be completely different.
Completely. The individual stories vanish. Student struggles get misinterpreted as lack of grit or a bad attitude. Their pain becomes statistical noise.
Wow, statistical noise.
And crucially, she points out how this method makes specific students essentially invisible. Gestalt processors, the disabled students with IEPs, the queer and trans kids. Their unique challenges, their specific perspectives, they just don't show up in those aggregated Likert scale results.
They're flattened out, erased by the categories themselves.
Precisely. Their reality doesn't fit the predetermined boxes.
This is a real challenge to how we often operate, isn't it? Relying so heavily on quantitative data to understand something as complex as human experience.
It is.
We think we're listening because we collected data, but maybe, as she suggests, we're just amplifying the categories we created, inadvertently silencing the actual voices.
It's that ventriloquism idea again. We might hear something, but is it the student's authentic voice or just an echo shaped by our question?
Right. It's the difference between genuine engagement and just information gathering that confirms what we already think.
A crucial difference.
Okay, so given all these challenges, these old debates, the kids being left out, the problems with fidelity, the limits of surveys, the author lands on this really powerful insistence, a demand, almost.
Yes.
She calls for narrative sovereignty. She defines it as the basic right to tell one's own story. And for her, this isn't some nice-to-have extra. It's not a luxury, but a necessity.
Absolutely. This feels like the heart of her proposed solution, the way forward.
It does. It feels like the core argument.
And this concept, narrative sovereignty, is why she co-founded her publication, The Outside. It exists, she says, to insist on narrative sovereignty, to refuse the erasure of student voice into data sets and position statements.
So creating a space for those unfiltered stories.
Exactly. The goal is clear. Bring the children back into view, make sure they are the protagonists of their own learning, not just, background characters in some professional debate happening over their heads.
Protagonist, not background. I like that.
And stepping back, Hoerricks argues that if there's a true missing middle in education, it's not just between special ed and general viewpoints. It's profoundly between the institutions that debate and the children who endure.
Wow. Between the debaters and the endurers.
Right. And until we name that gap and actively work to fill it with the real, unmediated voices of disabled, neurodivergent, and marginalized students, well, we'll just keep rehearsing old wars. We'll keep missing the whole point.
Yeah.
So her essay ends with this really strong refusal. A refusal to let students become ghosts of another forgotten war. Instead, she says, we must choose the students. Their stories, their struggles, their sovereignty.
Choosing the students, it sounds so simple, but based on everything we've discussed, it's actually quite radical.
It is. It requires a fundamental shift.
And this idea, narrative sovereignty, it feels like it stretches way beyond just education, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you think about any field, any conversation, whose stories get told, whose stories are seen as the default, the important ones.
Whose narrative holds power.
Exactly. And the implication here is that actively ensuring the voices of those most affected by decisions are the ones actually shaping the conversation. That's not just good practice, it's an act of justice.
It's about shifting power, allowing the true experts, the experts of their own lives, to lead the way.
A really powerful call to action for truly authentic listening.
Definitely.
So we've taken quite a journey through Jaime Hoerricks' essay, Not Another Forgotten Echo. We've explored how education debates can sideline student voices, how that fidelity culture might cause harm, and how even surveys meant to listen can end up flattening experiences. The real missing middle, as she argues so convincingly, seems to be right there between the institutions doing the talking and the children doing the enduring.
A gap we urgently need to bridge.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty critical, maybe provocative thought to chew on.
Okay.
If our usual ways of hearing student voice, the debates, the surveys, can sometimes result in this ventriloquism, turning real struggles into just statistical noise, then what tangible, immediate steps can you take? Right now, in your own world, maybe you're in education, maybe leadership, maybe just in your everyday conversations, what can you do to make sure that every story isn't just heard, but is genuinely heeded?
Heeded and allowed to actually shape what happens next.
Exactly. Allowed to shape the way forward.
It's a big question.
It is. This whole deep dive really challenges us to look past the surface noise of debates and data points, to lean in and listen for those voices that are too often quieted or just missed entirely.
And to ask, what really changes when we finally choose the students, when we prioritize their stories, their struggles, and ultimately their sovereignty?
It's a question worth holding on to, I think, a constant reminder to try and build systems and conversations where every voice isn't just an echo, but a real shaping force.